As I was saying, welcome to webinar day. Today we're going to be looking at managing your RTO's compliance with standard one of the standards. Standard one of the standards, my apologies. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex Schroeder. Guys, I work as a sanction management specialist. I'm also one of 2 forensic auditors within the vet sector here in Australia. And I do lots of other things. I sit on the ASPA stakeholder liaison group. I sit on the ITECA Queensland State Committee. I've written RTO compliance courses, both accredited and non-accredited. But instead of boring you with my details or my pedigree, feel free to have a look at my LinkedIn profile if you really want to know more about me. And yeah, stalk me on LinkedIn if you want. Let's jump straight in. Quick housekeeping. Guys, I'm estimating that today might go for up to an hour and a half. We might get finished a bit sooner. However, as always, at the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A section. If for any stage or if for any reason I don't get around to answering your questions, or questions, or if at the end of the webinar, if you think of any questions that you wanted to ask or thought you should have asked, drop an email to info@arcp.edu.au and the guys will forward your emails on to me. As always, guys, I may get back to you in a phone call. I may just drop you an email. Sometimes it's just easier just to pick up the phone and just to ring a person rather than trying to write a long, laborious email. However, I promise I won't phone you at 10 o'clock at night. I might reply to your email at 10 o'clock at night, but I won't phone you at 10 o'clock at night. Quick one for you. Your certificate of attendance to the webinar should be issued to you within 48 hours. Now, how it works is you will get an email from RTO PD to say, hey, thanks for attending the webinar. When you see that email, please click on it because your link from which you download your statement of attendance will be in that email as well. If you don't receive that email, there could be a few reasons for it. First up, the certificates are sent to the email address that you use to log on to the webinar today. If you made a mistake in entering your email address, then obviously your statement of attainment will go through to that email and you will not be able to see it. Similarly, if you, I don't know what's happening here today. Similarly, if for any one reason the emails from ARCP or RTO-PD gets caught up in your spam folder, there's nothing that we can do. And sometimes we find that with larger RTOs within their servers, these emails might not come through. At the end of the day, the emails are sent out automatically by the go-to platform. And if for any reason you don't get your certificate, ARCP actually can't issue you one manually. And the reason for that is, guys, on today's webinar, we've got 495 people. If somebody comes in after the event and says, hey, I didn't get my PD certificate, it's highly labor intensive for ARCP to then go through and check that the person has attended the webinar, check how long they attended for, or if they just didn't just sign in and then disappear, and also for them to, it's just a long manual process. And given that these webinars are run free of charge, ARCP just doesn't have the extra resources available to go and try and do PD certificates manually. Having said that, I am quite sure that all of us are here not necessarily for a PD certificate, but to actually learn more today about compliance. So once again, if you don't get your PD certificate, as I said, unfortunately, ARCP can't help, but it may very well be that you missed the email that was sent you with a link, that it went through to either your spam folder, or it might be caught up in your RTO's server in its spam system, or it may be because of incorrect email details provided. One quick thing also is that we've had queries in the past where people said, hey, We both registered initially when we got the newsletter or the notification of the webinar, and then we sat and watched on one computer together. Can we both have a PD certificate? Guys, like I said, the PD certificates are issued to the email addresses with which you signed in to go to today. So if there's more than one person sharing a computer screen, then obviously only the email address that was entered in order to get into the webinar is going to be able to, or will be receiving a PD certificate. This is going to be, I think we've only got 1 or 2 more webinars left for this year. Let me just have a quick look. I know there's one on the 17th of November. There'll probably be one at the end of November, beginning of December, and then we are done for 2023. You will get emails from myself as well as RTO with the next 2 email topics. And then, guys, we resume again probably around about the beginning of February 2024. I won't be running any webinars in January 2024, simply because so many people are still on holidays, and also it's my time of the year to do preparations or to finish off my preparations for 2024. I've asked a few times in the past few webinars, can you guys please email me ideas of webinar topics that you'd like to see next year? And for those of you that have emailed me with webinar topics, thank you so much. I've had quite a few people, actually a large number of people, that have come back and said, yes, I'd like to hear about this and this in 24. Guys, thank you so much. For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to email me with webinar topics for 24, please do that, because at the end of the day, I really want the topics or the webinar topics that we have for 24, I want to be able to give you guys valuable content that is going to be meaningful and relevant to what you want to hear, instead of me trying to guess what the majority of people want to hear. So get those topics in, and I'm going to obviously see which topics have been requested by the most people, and those we are going to address in 24. Train and Assessor webinars, they will kick off again in February 24 as well. For those of you that don't know about the Train and Assessor webinars, once a month we run free Train and Assessor webinars designed for the trainers and assessors to maintain their currency. To maintain compliance with clause 1.13 of the RTO standards. And guys, as I said last webinar, I'm teasing you a bit again today. I have got an amazing new PD that I'm busy developing that we are going to be rolling out in 2024. I am going to give you guys more info on that in 2024, but it is going to be absolutely gorgeous. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. So guys, today we're looking at actions that you need to take as a compliance practitioner to ensure that your RTO remains compliant with standard 1 of the standards. Initially, I thought I would do all of the standards. However, if I had to do that, we'd be here for 3-4 hours. So as I said, we're going to look at standard 1 of the RTO standards, and I'm going to discuss with you guys what to do and how to make sure that your RTO is compliant with standard 1 of the RTO standards, and also to maintain your compliance with that. So let's kick off. Let's jump straight in. Guys, clauses 1.1 and 1.2 of the RTO standards, they deal with they address your training and assessment strategies. Now, think about it, that included in your training and assessment strategies, there are a few pieces of key information that you absolutely must include in a TAS. That is volume of learning, amount of training, the delivery resources that is going to be used to deliver the training. And guys, they include physical resources, it includes equipment, it includes human resources, and a few other things. And when we speak about delivery resources, think about it as what is necessary for the RTO to be able to go and deliver the training. Now, in some cases, some training packages and or training products actually list mandatory resources that the RTO must use, but your delivery resources also includes your physical resources, and they may be things like your physical resources may include where you have equipment. I know, for argument's sake, in the first aid unit of competency or units of competency, there's a whole list of resources that the RTO must use when they deliver that training. And that's things like defibrillators and mannequins and infant mannequins and all things like that. So when you look at your physical resources and your equipment, the first place to start is look at your training package and look at the requirements of each training product. Now, when I say training product, a training product is any training that is being delivered. So a training product can be a full qualification, it can be a standalone unit, it can be a skill set. When we are delivering accredited training to learners, that is collectively referred to as a training product. So when I suggest that you go and look at your training product, if for argument's sake you are delivering a full qualification, when you are doing your TASs, you need to go and look at every single unit of competency that is contained within your qualification, within your curriculum, to go and see if there's any special equipment or tools that you need to include in your training. Similarly, if you are delivering a skill set, you need to once again go into every single unit that is contained or that's included in that skill set. And you need to go and see if it requires any specific equipment or if it mandates the use of any specific equipment. Your delivery resources will also include where the training is being delivered from. And we are going to, and when we speak where the training is being delivered from, whether it is being delivered from a physical location, whether it is being delivered from the client's premises, it might be delivered from a rented training facility, or it might be delivered online or blended. Whatever your delivery location is, you need to be very specific about that in your TAS. You also need to include your human resources. And with your human resources, I'm speaking about your trainers and assessors, because those are the only human resources that are directly relevant to the delivery of the training. Now, I often, when we go and do audits for RTOs, or when we help them rectify a negative audit outcome, we often see in their TASs that they'll go and actually list the trainers and assessors delivering the training and assessment by name. It's not wrong to do it, but it is very, very, very dangerous to do it. And the reason why I say that is this. Imagine if you have a trainer and assessor that has left your RTO. You need to, once that trainer and assessor has parted company with your RTO, there are so many different documents that need to be adjusted to go and remove them from that document. And so often RTOs forget to also go into the TASs of the training products that the trainer and assessor was delivering, and to go and change the details there as well. And the regulator actually looks at things like that very, very closely. So when it comes to listing your trainers and assessors, what I always recommend an RTO does is, instead of going listing your trainers and assessors by name, just put a comment there, something like trainer and assessor details can be found in our trainer and assessor folder, or trainer and assessor register, or something like that. If you do it like that, if you keep it generalized, it means that when a trainer and assessor parts company with your RTO, all you then need to do is, instead of going into all of the TASs and correcting it there, as well as everywhere else, all you then need to do is not worry about your TAS, but then in your trainer and assessor delivery register, just go and take their name out. So once again, there's nothing in the standards or the NVR Act that says that we need to list the trainers and assessors by name. And it's really easy and safe practice to simply say train and assessor details for this training product can be found at insert the location. Does that make sense? Oh, I can see there's plenty of hands going up about that one. There always is. Guys, I'll get to that when we do Q&A. Another thing that clause 1.1 and 1.2 requires an RTO to do is to actually monitor the delivery of the training and assessment. And with the delivery, we also mean the training and assessment practices. And guys, that includes actually monitoring how trainers are delivering the training and how the assessment practices are being carried out within your RTO. Now, when it comes to monitoring the delivery that your trainers and assessors do, if your trainers and assessors are delivering face-to-face, it means that somebody from your compliance team needs to physically be in one of the trainer and assessors' classrooms while they are delivering training, and they need to be sitting there and they need to be almost doing an audit on how the trainer and assessor is delivering the training. We've got a client in Melbourne who's got facilities in Sydney and Hobart. And one of the things that we'll be doing for them in the new year is actually getting on a plane, going to Hobart and conducting a monitoring activity on how their trainers are delivering training in Hobart. Similarly, we've got RTOs, well, we've got a number of RTOs that have different training locations in different states. And the best way, and I'd almost say to you, the only way to monitor how the trainers are delivering this training is to actually physically sit there in the classroom and watch them. Now, you don't have to sit there for an 8-hour classroom session. You may choose to spend an hour there. You may choose to spend an hour and a half there. It's up to you to determine the amount of time that you are going to be sitting in on the training that they're delivering. But before you do that, you need to have a fairly comprehensive checklist of what it is that you are monitoring the trainer's delivery strategies on. So it's no good just going in there and sitting there with a pad and a pen and going, yep, 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 yep. Remember, like anything else in compliance, we need to have templates, we need to have forms, but we also need to have consistency. So within your RTO, within your compliance framework, you should have a trainer and assessor monitoring almost like an audit sheet that you use to monitor every single trainer and assessor's delivery on, regardless of how the delivery occurs. And guys, I know I've said this twice, I'm just going to stress it just one more time. If it is face-to-face delivery, you actually need to physically be in the classroom or be in the delivery location and be observing how your trainers are delivering training. If your training is being delivered online, then especially where there are workshops, tutorials, etc., then the way to monitor the delivery of training is to dial in as well when they do these, or dial in, sorry, I sound so old, is to actually join the online class, webinar, tutorial, however it is delivered in your RTO, but sit there as an observer and observe your trainer that way. And once again, you are probably going to use the same checklist, the same audit checklist for your trainers and assessors, regardless whether or not they are delivering online, face-to-face, etc. Now, where you have trainers and assessors that do on-the-job delivery, you may, when you do your monitoring activity template, you may want to think whether that template should be the same for trainers and assessors doing on-the-job delivery or doing online or face-to-face delivery. Because in some instances, and I'm thinking here specifically, let's say for argument's sake, that you've got a trainer and assessor who's delivering on-the-job training in a location or in a class location, and the location is a warehouse. One of the very, very first things that the trainer and assessor should be doing before the training and assessment or the training activities and delivery actually starts is they should be doing toolbox talks. They should be, before they start, they should be talking with their learners about where the exits are, where the securities are, and how to obviously conduct themselves in that training environment in a safe manner. So in that instance, I would imagine that your training and assessment monitoring template is going to be slightly different than somebody who is delivering in a classroom or delivering online. Now, if you have trainers and assessors that do blended delivery, where they are doing some in the classroom and some online, it is a really good idea to monitor their training activities, both in the classroom as well as in the online environment. And of course, with your training monitoring, with the monitoring of your training and assessment practices, you want to have a policy around that. You want to have a policy, or at least, if not a policy, at a minimum, a procedure around that, so that it is quite obvious why you do it, how you do it, when you do it, and what you do with the outcomes, etc. Now, speaking of the outcomes, obviously it's a case of when the reason why we are monitoring our trainers' training practices is to make sure that how they are delivering the training is effective and is providing the learners with the optimal learning journey that they possibly can. You also have an opportunity when you are sitting there and when you are monitoring the trainers and how they deliver. And when you are, because remember, you're sitting there as an observer, it's actually really, really good for the trainers as well as for the RTO. Because put aside one moment the requirements of clauses 1.1 and 1.2 that says we have to do it, it's also excellent feedback, because you may find that there are areas that the trainer could do better in. We had a scenario a little while ago. I think we were up in Perth doing monitoring the training practices for an RTO. And what we found is, it was very interesting. It was a Cricos college, so international students. And with the one trainer and assessor, they were so nervous when they were delivering the training that a number of times the learners were actually saying, "Can you repeat that?" And they were stumbling over their words, and you could just see that they were incredibly nervous. Now, afterwards, when we sat down with the CEO, the compliance manager, and with the trainer, and we said, "Look, this was our observation." The trainer said, "Oh, but I was so nervous having you there." And yes, I accept that when you are being observed doing your job, that you can be nervous. However, the very first thing that came to my mind is, if the trainer is really confident in what they are delivering and how they are delivering it, then a lot of the nervousness should just go out of the window. It shouldn't be there. And secondly, if the trainer was nervous with us observing them, how do we know that they are not nervous when they're not being observed? And in that instance, we gave some excellent feedback insofar as that the trainer may benefit from additional help in being more confident in what they are delivering, and also in how their delivery is being received by their students. We had another trainer that we observed as well, and in that case, it was a strange one, because this trainer had, and I'm almost cringing as I'm saying this, but this trainer had a really, really, really thick accent. And I actually personally sat into that monitoring session, and I could hardly understand what they were saying. But they also had a lot of these students who you could just see their eyes were glazing over, and sometimes the students were even saying, "Hey, I don't understand what you are saying." So guys, that is, in that instance, that is an indication that the training being delivered may not be effective, because if you've got a room full of students there and they actually don't understand what the trainer is saying, well, then they can't absorb the training being delivered, and therefore they are not going to receive sufficient training or sufficient quality training in order to actually know what they are learning and in order to go and do the assessment. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Um, if you are when you are doing your training monitoring, you also would like to, or you also want to check out, or you also want to observe things like, is the trainer engaging with the learners in a meaningful way? There's nothing worse than being in a training session and the trainer sits there and they are as dry as chalk. You know the expression, hey, it's more interesting watching paint dry on a wall. I've actually been in training sessions where you sit and you go, oh, for goodness sake, can you get to the point? Or, oh my gosh, just get me out of here. This is an hour of my life I'll never ever get back. I'll never ever forget when I was doing my law degree. Now, I did my law degree when I was I think I started when I was about 30. So as a mature student, and at the time I was living in, oh, it was either Singapore, Malaysia, or Thailand, or Vietnam, one of the four. I think I was in Singapore. So what happened is I was doing my learning online, and then what I would do is once a semester, the uni used to run residential schools for online students where you could actually go to the campus and um, you actually attended classes. I used to love going to residential school, and it was fun coming back to Australia because obviously now I'm living overseas. But also it was fun interacting with my classmates that I got to know online. But it was also so valuable being able to actually sit in on a lecture and being able to ask questions and just feel like a normal uni student, not like an online learner. We had one lecture, and I'm trying to think, don't remember what the topic was, but they sat there and they literally read off their PowerPoint slides word for word. And I remember sitting there in that specific, and I think that res class lasted for about 2 or 3 days. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Have I literally just flown in from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, or Vietnam? Like I said, I forget which one. But have I literally just flown in from overseas to come to a residential school? I've taken time away from my family. I've spent a lot of money on airfares, on accommodation, rental cars to get here to Armidale, and are you really sitting there and reading off a friggin' PowerPoint slide? And I remember thinking to myself, I could just as well have read off the PowerPoint slide myself. And it was annoying. And I think when I realized that they were not actually going to be giving us or teaching us anything, they were just going to be reading off PowerPoint slides. If memory serves, and guys, I am going back, 20 odd years ago. If memory serves, my mind, or knowing myself, at that stage, my mind probably would have gone a bit blank. Your students in the classrooms are often no different. We've got to make the delivery of training interesting. Or let me give you guys a more pertinent or a more relevant example. Since I've been running these webinars, I often go to webinars that other compliance consultants run, and I'll go and pay the 80, $90 to go and attend it because I want to see how they are delivering their webinars so that I can get an idea of how I can improve how I deliver my webinars. And there's one specific chap who also, and I'm sort of masking my words with politeness right now, but there's one specific chap who also sits there and all he does is read off the PowerPoints slide by slide, word by word. And I like it that he does that. Or I like it that I saw him doing it because I don't read word for word in case you guys haven't noticed, but it's also good to be on the receiving end of it and sit there and read, or have the presenter read off word by word and going, oh my gosh, this is boring. What am I doing here? You know, I'm spending an hour here where I've got this much work to go and do. What am I doing here? So, coming back to the benefits of monitoring how training is delivered, when you do your delivery or when you do the monitoring of the delivery of training, don't only do it because the RTO standards require us to do it. Do it as well so that you can actually provide meaningful feedback to the trainer as well as to the PO, CEO, depending on your RTO structure, so that management also has an idea of whether or not we are providing our learners with the best we possibly can, or if there is areas in which we need to help our trainers develop better so that they are better at delivering training. As simple as that. Now, guys, remember clause 1.1, 1.2 also includes the monitoring of assessment practices. Now, what is easy about doing the monitoring of assessment practices under these clauses is they are done when we do the validations of our assessment outcomes. So insofar as monitoring your assessment practices, I'm not that concerned about doing one-on-one timed scheduled assessment practice monitoring by you as a compliance practitioner, because as I said, that happens when you are validating your assessment outcomes in any case. But regardless of how your monitoring of your delivering of training and your assessment practices are done, remember, you've got to have a policy or at a minimum a procedure on how it happens. You've also got to have the right documentation. And guys, you've got to go and have a strategy. Like everything else in compliance, we don't just wake up on a Wednesday morning and go, I think today I feel like walking into Joe Bloggs' training room and see how he does things. Everything that we do in compliance, it's structured, it is timed, there are strategies or plans behind it. And the same goes for your monitoring activities as well. Give me one sec. Oh, yeah, there's nothing worse than cold tea. Um, And we see so many RTOs fail audit because they aren't monitoring the training and assessment practices, because they don't have a strategy in place, they don't have any schedules in place for that, and or they don't actually keep adequate records of how they are monitoring, especially their assessment practices. Once again, guys, for those of you guys that joined a little bit late, the best way or your best record keeping mechanism of the monitoring activities that you have done on the delivery of training is having your observation sheet and completing that for every single trainer that you are observing. Oh, I spoke a lot about two clauses, didn't I? Guys, clauses 1.3 and 1.4. Clauses 1.3 and 1.4, the standards, focus on having sufficient resources. And when we say sufficient resources, it covers off trainers and assessors. So we need to make sure that we have got sufficient trainers and assessors that can deliver our training products for us. But also remember that what is really relevant here is that when they say sufficient trainers and assessors, it also means that you need to be very mindful of your quota when it comes to, or your, I think quota is the right word, when it comes to how many learners each trainer has. I know that the standards, or neither the standards nor the NBR Act, give us any quantitative guidance on what the trainer-learner ratio should be. However, common sense must come into that. If you have a trainer that is delivering to 50 learners in one sitting, how is that trainer able to spread themselves or to be able to give every single learner a really quality learning experience? I remember years and years and years back, before I came into compliance, when I was training, I worked for a number of Crikos colleges. And I know that back those days, and guys, I'm really going back many many years ago. And I know things have changed slightly with Crycos colleges, but I remember the in thing with Crycos colleges those days was to have just to spread their trainers as thin as they possibly could, because obviously it was cost saving as well, and to have as many students in a class as they could. I had classes where I think, and I'm thinking hard now, I know I had some classes where I was expected to train 35, 40 plus people in one single class. Although, and I'm going back to, although neither the NBR Act nor the RTO standards say, hey, this is the ratio, if you think about it, when you've got one trainer and assessor up there delivering to 40 odd people or 35 students, it is incredibly exhausting for the trainer to be on their toes and to be ready for questions to be thrown at them from 35, 40 people. But it's also a case of, when you've got students sitting in a really, really large environment, or if they are one of many in the class, sometimes students just don't want to ask a question in front of a large group of people because they might think they're going to sound stupid. But not only that, it's also a case of if your trainers and assessors aren't overloaded with the number of students that they have in the class, it means that, all things being equal, that they can put a bit more of themselves in, that they can just put that little bit more effort in without completely exhausting themselves. And ultimately, it just provides a higher quality of training experience for your learners. When it comes to assessments, so often we see that assessors, if you've got a class of, even 30 students, it means that the assessor then also has to go and assess 30 assessments for that class, multiplied by all the other cohorts and classes that they train. And that is so often when we see ticking and flicking coming along, because these guys are tired. Or, even if they weren't tired when they started the assessment, after you've done 10 or 12 assessments from exactly the same cohort in exactly the same unit of competency, your brain goes numb, or at least my brain goes numb. So when clauses 1.3 and 1.4 says we've got to have sufficient trainers and assessors for what we are delivering, it's up to your RTO to make the call on your trainer assessor student ratio. However, if your RTO does decide to err on the side of or not to err on the side of caution, if your RTO does decide to have large classes or large cohorts per trainer and assessor, be very, very, very prepared to have an ironclad justification for that at audit time. Because if you don't, if your auditor believes that your trainer assessor student ratio is too high, and even if you have a justification, but the justification isn't ironclad, then you are going to fail. Your RTO will fail the requirements of those clauses at audit time. So please be careful about that. I was going to carry on more about that, but I think I've made my point. Clause 1.3 and 1.4 also requires your RTO to have enough student support resources for the number of students that you have. And when I say the number of students that you have, it's not also strictly only on the number of students. It also depends on your cohorts, characteristics, etc. So, give you an example. AICP, they only deliver online, and all of their courses are only online. It's self-paced, etc., etc. Their student support team, I think they've only got 3 or 4 people in their student support team, and that works well for the number of students that they have at any one time, because they've got sufficient student support resources to be able to, generally speaking, all things being equal, to be able to respond to students in a timely manner. Let's take, for argument's sake, let's say you're running a Crycos college and you have got 800 students in your college. In that case, to have 1 student support officer or 2 student support officers may not be sufficient, because remember, CRICOS students, generally speaking, they require just a little bit more because they are international students. They're here from different countries. They're away from their home country, and things are so much different for them. And especially if English isn't their first language. If I think, let's say for argument's sake, that your RTO delivers to people that are returning to work after being out of the workforce for a long time, those kind of students are probably also going to require or have different student support requirements than, for argument's sake, an online learner. So your RTO really needs to have a look at the general characteristics of your cohorts, and you need to go and determine how much student support resources you do need to have, or how many resources you need to dedicate towards student support. My apologies. And once again, it's really, really important that you make sure that you are providing sufficient student support, people, personnel, resources to your students. Now, often the easiest way to decide how many student support team members you need is have a look at, or go ahead and do an analysis of what your RTO is currently doing, what it has done historically. And historically, we may decide to look over the past 12 months and use that as a measuring yardstick to see whether your student support team is inundated, whether there are student support queries that don't get answered for weeks on end because you don't have enough staff, or whether you've got student support team members that sit there and twiddle their thumbs because you've got too many staff. So my suggestion to you is that is probably the safest way to go and do a measurement of whether or not your student support resources are sufficient for the number of learners that you've got. And guys, it's a really, really good idea if your RTO works on having a conservative number of student support officers for your number of learners. It's a really good idea to go and, in your compliance records, to go and make a note of the justification that your RTO developed to be able to justify your ratio between student support resources and your number of students. Because once again, when it comes to audit time, if the auditor thinks that you don't have sufficient student resource or student support resources, if your RTO has a solid justification that makes sense, then you've got a far better chance of the auditor going, yep, you know what, I can see where you're coming from. Versus the RTO going, well, we've got 800 students, we've got 1.5 student support people, and we believe this is enough because it usually is. And that's not going to get you very far in audit time whatsoever. Two other things that clauses 1.3 and 1.4 include is your assessment tools and your learning resources. Now, guys, remember your assessment tools include your candidate assessment tasks. So we call them candidate assessment kits. It includes your assessor guides with benchmark answers. It includes RPL kits, and it also includes your mapping. Now, we often find that people forget that clause 1.3, 1.4 requires them to have adequate and compliant assessment resources so often. And what happens is normally if an RTO has failed clause 1.8 of the standards at audit time, if they are non-compliant with clause 1.8, which says that our assessment practices need to be hunky-dory, they often also fall short of clause 1.3, 1.4. If your assessment tools are non-compliant, you will not pass audit. Come audit time, you will in all likelihood be non-compliant with clause 1.8, clause 1.3, clause 1.4. Similarly, you have to have RPL kits for every training product that you have on scope, unless the training product itself or the relevant training package prohibits RPLing completely. Once again, if you don't have your RPL kits, if there's nothing in the training product or the training package that prohibits RPLing, if you don't have RPL kits, you are going to fall short come audit time. You will be non-compliant with clauses 1.3, 1.4 in all likelihood. Your sufficient resources also include the training facilities, and they include whether you deliver online learning, blended learning, whether you deliver face-to-face, your training, your locations, the training equipment that we spoke about earlier. I will never forget, it must have been around, I think it was just before COVID. So COVID hit us in 2020. I think it was around about March, April-ish, when Australia finally went, we got COVID. It was just before that, but we had an RTO come to us, and they were being asked for left, right, and centered, and these guys came up with black and blue bruises. However, they were an online deliverer, and when ASQA was sort of going through their scratching and searching, it didn't have to scratch and search very deep, so I'll rephrase that. When ASQA was going through the auditing process, and they would ask the RTO, can you please provide us with this, and can you provide us with that, etc. When she didn't have the things on hand, she would go back to ASQA and she would say to them, I can't do it right now, I'm having troubles with my internet. Now, this specific RTO used that excuse numerous times, and I mean stupidly numerous times. And ASQA went, yep, all right, tell us when you're ready. Yep, we'll wait for internet to get sorted out. Yep, you don't have internet. This was your due date. You didn't have internet by that date. Okay, you 2 days late. Yep, it's internet. And you know what? When it came down to them auditing her clause, or when it came down to the audit report, she was non-compliant with clauses 1.3 and 1.4. Because ASQA turned around and they said, if you are delivering online and you don't have a stable internet, or if you don't have a stable internet if you don't have reliable internet service, then how are your learners going to be able to have a good journey? So guys, once again, be very, very careful that you have sufficient resources and training facilities, and also even if you are delivering blended or online, make sure that what you are providing your students with is quality. Make sure that you provide them with a quality learning journey. Going up, clause 2.2, I was speaking about the monitoring of and of delivery of training and assessment earlier on. Remember that when you are, or part of the monitoring activities under clause 2.2 is not only to monitor the delivery of your assessment, of your training, but also your record keeping. Now, as I said earlier on, the best record keeping possible is your checklist when you go into your monitoring activities, your monitoring schedules, etc. But you also, the purpose of monitoring the delivery of your training is so that the RTO can see if there's areas that need improvement. Now, another area or another way to establish if the training is being delivered in a way that is best for your students is from student feedback. I know that we have QI data reporting every year, and I know that we are still using the same questionnaires that I think we've been using for the past 10, 15 years. The ones that says AQTF on top, even though it's now AQF, and it has, I think, a page or 2 pages, and there's like 100 questions, and people just tick a box here and tick a box there. Guys, when it comes to getting student feedback, please don't rely solely on the information from your QA data or from your AQTF questionnaires, because to sit there and for any student to sit there and go through this whole list of questions, often students will go and they will just tick anything, just get it over and done with. But also the questions that are asked in those forms, are not, do not always, and not every single question is actually sufficient in providing the RTO with valuable feedback. And guys, remember, feedback is only valuable, or feedback is only relevant, or feedback is the most useful when the feedback is relevant and when the feedback is on relevant questions or on relevant different areas of the student's experience. So what we suggest to our RTO clients is, yes, you've got your AQTF, but it bothers me to say AQTF, but you've got your AQTF questionnaires. But apart from that, sit down and have a think about what kind of feedback you as the RTO, want to collect from your students so that you can gauge whether you are delivering or providing them with a quality learning journey, and what kind of feedback your RTO would find helpful to determine if and what improvements need to be made. And once you've done that, go and put together your own questionnaire. Very, very simple. Just go and make up your own questionnaire, because that way you can ensure that the data that you are gathering is going to be relevant for your RTO. Now, you'd still have to do your QI data reporting, and for that you'd still need to use the AQTF forms, but we are now speaking about two different feedback mechanisms. The one that we are using for the purpose of reporting our QA data, and the other one is for the purpose of seeing how we as an RTO can improve our services to our students. And that, of course, then rolls very, very nicely into your continuous improvement as well. The next thing I want to have a look at is industry engagement. And guys, once again, this is something where a number of RTOs come all the time and fall down very, very easily or very readily. Industry engagement, what you need to do and have to meet the requirements of clauses 1.5 and 1.6 is you must have an industry engagement strategy. You must have a strategy that says, this is the sectors of the industry that we are going to be engaging with. This is the regularity in which we are going to be engaging with them. And these are the types of industry partners or the types of industry players that we want to engage in when we do our industry engagement. And I'm not suggesting that in your strategy you need to go and actually list actual businesses. In fact, please don't do that, because businesses change. But you need to go and identify the type of business that you would want to go and engage with. To give you an idea, if you are delivering, I think it's the Cert 3 or the Cert 4 in Asian cooking. I think there's a Cert 4 in Asian cookery or commercial cookery or something like that. Your industry consultation strategy, or your industry engagement strategy should identify that you are going to be engaging with Asian restaurants, if it's Asian cooking, Asian restaurants. You are going to be engaging with commercial, I'm going to say this wrong, or providers of commercial cooking. I've just said that very wrong. We often see that RTOs that deliver commercial cooking, they will go and do their industry consultation with a takeaway shop or a fast food, or fast food takeaway, the same. Guys, you need to, when you do your industry engagement, you need to look at your training product. You need to see what the outcomes of the training product should be to its graduates, and your industry consultation must be relevant to that. So once again, if you are doing industry engagement with commercial cookery, yes, in a takeaway shop, they do cookery. However, it is not on the scale that it is done within a restaurant, for argument's sake. And if your training product, if the learning outcomes is to prepare your students for being able to go and work in a big restaurant, then doing your industry engagement with a takeaway place is not going to cut it. You also need to, like I said, you need to go and identify the types of industry participants that you want to be engaging with. You've then got to be really, really clear on the information that you are going to be gathering in your industry engagement activities. Now, apart from the information that you want to gather insofar as the delivery of training and assessment, you need to establish, or your industry engagement documentation needs to establish a few things. A, you obviously need to know the name of the industry participant or specialist that you're engaging with. You need to know where they work and what their contact details are. So contact details, so it's name, it's the employer, and contact details, i.e. mobile phone and email address at a minimum. And that is so that if anybody wants to go and confirm that this industry engagement has been done, that it's easy to contact them. Then you need to go and ask them to, or you need to establish why they are suitable as an industry engagement or as an industry specialist. So you've got to have a question on your industry engagement form that says something, hey, tell us who you are, tell us a bit about your experience within the sector that makes you suitable as an industry specialist, be able to help us with our engagement. You also want to be gathering information about how your training and assessment, or how the training and the assessment that is described in your TAS, how that is going to be meeting industry expectations. And you also obviously need to have a section there on your trainers and assessors and what the industry specialist believes your trainers, or what your trainer attributes should be, for the industry specialist to be confident that training delivered by that trainer is going to be, or by a trainer with those attributes, is going to be beneficial to graduates. Because remember, in the vet sector, we are essentially, what we are doing is we are preparing our learners, who will then become our graduates. We are preparing to have them industry ready. And if we don't do our industry engagement, and if our industry engagement isn't completely relevant to what we are delivering, and if we're not engaging with the kind of specialists that are relevant within the industry sector, we actually can't justify that our training, that the delivery of our training and assessment is sufficient and is of high enough quality to have our graduates industry ready. I can see another couple of hands have just gone up, guys. We'll get to that in the FAQ section. You need to make sure that the information that you have gathered is recorded. And guys, please, please, please have written records of this. So often we go into an RTO and they say, oh yeah, our industry engagement, our industry consultation is done over the phone with people, and I've made a diary note. So that's not cutting it, and we're seeing it in audit report after audit report after audit report. It's just not cutting it. So the best thing that you can do for your RTO is have a standard industry engagement template. Go and take some time, go and develop it, have a good old-fashioned think about the kind of questions that you want to ask, and go and put a template together. And when you are going out for industry engagement, ask your industry specialist to complete that template, to complete the questionnaire, because then there is rock solid proof that yes, your RTO has done industry engagement. And here's the thing, in my opinion, a lot of RTOs absolutely hate doing industry engagement, because it's an activity that it's not a profit center activity. It's an activity that costs us money to go and undertake, and there's no clear and immediate return on it. So we hate it. And also, we don't like paperwork the whole time, so we hate it. When ask will come in, and when the auditor says, show me your industry engagement, and the RTO goes, oh, yep, we do it, so over the phone, and I make a note in my diary, I can see the ASPR's face go, the ASPR auditor's face go, I hear this from the whole time. And it is very, very easy to fail audit because although your industry engagement might have been done verbally, because you don't actually have proof of it. Also remember that if we are doing industry engagement on one training product, we want to speak to at least 3 industry specialists. It might even be 5 or 6 of them. We want to speak to at least 3 industry specialists and engage with them to get their feedback on how we plan to deliver the training and assessment. And in order to make sure that our feedback is meaningful, we want the questions that we are asking them, we want that to be consistent. We want to ask every single one of these people the same question so we can analyze the answers and how do you get a really good picture of what you're doing is great or you should improve here and there if you are asking different people different questions. Does that make sense? Your RTO as part of your industry engagement compliance system will also have an industry engagement record, and you will obviously also go and record your industry engagement activities in your industry engagement, not record, sorry, register. Guys, the one category of people that you should not be using for industry engagement is your trainers and assessors. And I know that it sounds so obvious, but we have so many RTOs that do use their trainers and assessors as industry consultants. Now, I always fail to see the logic behind it because we are, by using your trainers and assessors as industry specialists, we are saying to the people that are delivering the training to tell us if how they are delivering or how they're supposed to be delivering the training and doing the assessments if that is what industry needs. But these are trainers and assessors that, at least on a part-time basis, unless they're working for your RTO, or let's say full-time trainers and assessors, we can't go to full-time trainers and assessors and say to them, hey, mate, please be our industry our industry specialist for industry engagement purposes for the Diploma of Quality Auditing. Because the trainers and assessors, they are full-time trainers and assessors. They are not full-time auditors. They are not full-time risk management specialists. They are not full-time. I'm trying to desperately think of the units in quality auditing, but they don't work full-time in the industry as auditors. So why would we be asking our trainers and assessors to be our industry specialists? Now, there are 1 or 2 exceptions to that. I know of a great number of RTOs, and I'm going back to the cookery qualifications, whose trainers and assessors work for them part-time, but they work in, large, big restaurants as chefs, etc. If you have that kind of scenario, yep, you may want to use them as trainers and as industry specialists in their capacity as a chef. However, it's safer not to, because once again, it doesn't look good from an auditing point of view, and it just kind of looks like your RTO has taken a shortcut. Please never forget when you do your industry engagement that the questions that you are asking must be meaningful, they must be relevant, and they must be designed in such a way that your RTO can check whether or not the way that you deliver training and assessment is going to produce the best results for our graduates compared to what industry requirements are. And guys, one more time with feeling, please don't ask your trainers and assessors to be industry consultants. It is fraught. That practice is absolutely fraught with danger. Course 1.7 is your complaints and appeals. And guys, very, very, very quickly on this, because we've done complaints and appeals in a number of webinars this year. Please remember that your RTO has 60 days from the date that a complaint or an appeal is lodged. Your RTO has 60 days in which to investigate and come up with an with a resolution or come up with a finding. We so often see RTOs that go in their complaints and appeals policy, they say, oh, we'll resolve it within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so often they have that shortened time period in there because it sounds impressive. And maybe it's because they generally can resolve them within 2 or 3 weeks. But, and here comes the but, there's always a but. Guys, if your RTO's complaints and appeals policy says that there will be a resolution in anything less than 60 days, please do yourself a massive favor and go and change it to be 60 days. If you then resolve the complaint or appeal within 10 days or 20 days or 30 days, good on you. But given that we have been given a window of time of 60 days in which to go and resolve a complaint, give your RTO that space, because if, regardless that the RTO standard says 60 days, if your RTO's policy says we will resolve within 3 weeks, you are then bound by the 3 weeks. And the first time that you might not do the 3 weeks or that you don't reach the 3 weeks, yep, you know what? Stuff happens. The second time, the third time, it comes across as you are breaching your RTO's policy on resolving complaints and appeals. So once again, with feeling, guys, please do yourselves a favor, go and look at your RTO's complaints and appeals policy. If your policy says that you'll resolve it in anything less than 60 days, please go and change it to 60 days. There's no reason not to. Now, remember that with the 60 days, we have a little bit of leniency because the standards say that we need to resolve it within 60 days unless there is a really good reason why you can't. And if there is a really good reason why you can't, what the RTO simply needs to do is you simply need to go and communicate in writing with the complainant or the appellant that you won't be able to resolve in 60 days, but you will resolve for them as soon as very possible thereafter. And then you also need to provide them with regular updates, because remember, we are now in the scenario that we can't do it within 60 days, and then you've got to go and provide them with regular updates once you've reached day 60. The best example that I can give you is we had a client who, you know how every RTO always has that student? We had a client who had one of that student, and she decided to go and lodge I think she was being cancelled for plagiarism or continued plagiarism or something like that. Anyway, the RTO was actually cancelling her enrollment due to, I think it was plagiarism. And she decided, I think it was 5 days before the RTO closed for Christmas, she decided to go and lodge a complaint that went back, that started off with the RTO's actions when she enrolled 13 months earlier, up until the time that they found her guilty of plagiarism for, I think, the 4th time. So she went from the time of her enrollment straight through to when she was finally being cancelled for plagiarism, and she complained about every single damn little thing that she could have. And like I said, this was about 4 or 5 days before the RTO closed for Christmas. Now, if I remember, this RTO, I think they closed from about mid-December through to about last week in January. So there in itself was 5 weeks of the 60 days that they simply weren't working, and therefore they could not investigate her complaint. And then the volume of the complaint, or the volume of things that she complained about, was so much that I think when they came back after their Christmas break, I think they had 2 people spending almost 3 weeks investigating every single little thing that she complained about, drawing files, drawing records, responding to it, etc. So given the amount of stuff that she complained about, given the timing that she lodged her complaint, the RTO wouldn't have been able to complete that within 60 days. When they called us and said, hey, Alex, what do we do? I said to them, it's very, very simple. You go back to and you say to, look, thank you for your complaint. We are closing for Christmas in X number or from this date to this date. We won't be able to resolve your complaint within 60 days. However, we will try and resolve it as soon as we can once we are back from our annual shutdown, and we will keep you up to date with how it's going, or words to that effect. One of the things that I learned from that specific experience is, you see, not everybody complains about things that happened before Noah was even a twinkle in his father's eye, but some people do. And since that incident, I've been advising RTOs to, when you write your complaints policy, to actually write in there to include that you can only, or a person can only complain about events that were XYZ old. Because most RTOs have in their policy, they'll have, look, it must be reported in a timely manner. In a timely manner, guys, is so broad. It's almost like how long is a piece of string. Whereas if your policy says, hey, if you've got a complaint, you need to, or if you intend to lodge an official complaint, it must be lodged within 14 days or 21 days, a reasonable time period, not 2 days. But, if you go 14 days or 21 days from the date that the incident happened, and if you're very, very clear on, we will not investigate complaints of events that happened later, or before, or more historically than that. If you then have the student that comes and wants to complain about anything and everything over the last 13 months, you can simply say, no, we will only investigate anything relevant in the last insert time frame period. Since we helped our client with that student, we have helped so many other RTOs implement that, and we actually had one of our clients come to us about a few months ago, and they also had a student that was complaining about things from years past, and we simply said to them, hey, in your correspondence, A, acknowledge the complaint, but B, also say, hey, our policy states that you have 21 days in which to, from the time that the event occurred, in which to lodge your complaint. You're out of the 21 days, and we will only investigate anything in the 21-day period. And guys, obviously your complaints and appeals policy is in your student handbook. So your learner is aware of that, and they were aware of that before they enrolled, because your learner handbook is available on your website. So as long as you cross all the I's and dot all the, as long as you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, you should never get into strife for how you handle complaints and appeals. Remember also that the way that you handle complaints, it must be fair. The outcomes must be justifiable. And when I say, I'm going to go back to fair, it's got to be fair to both the RTO and the learner. It can't only be fair to the RTO because, well, where's the justice in that? And it can't only be fair to the learner because, well, where's the justice in that? It's got to be fair for everybody. And when we've resolved a complaint or an appeal, we've got to keep thorough records of it, because believe me, if somebody has gone to the extent of putting in a formal complaint with your RTO about an event, if they don't like the outcome of the investigation of the complaint, there is such a good opportunity that they're going to go one step further and either go to fair trading or to the ombudsman or to ASQA and go and lodge a complaint about your RTO. And if an external party comes back and they say, look, we've had this complaint lodged about your RTO, we're going to investigate it. If you can then go back and say, hey, these are the circumstances, here's our policy, here's what the learner did, here's when the complaint was lodged, here's how it was investigated, here's the outcomes, and everything is documented and everything is per your policy, you're going to have a walk in the park when it comes to being invested, or when it comes to then going to a external party. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm very, very quickly running out of time. So I'm going to just keep the yakking to a bit of a minimum. How does that sound? Guys, clause 1.8, remember clause 1.8 speaks about the assessment of the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence. And those are directly relevant to your assessment tools, your assessment practices, and your assessment outcomes. If your RTO's assessment tools are not valid and are not compliant, i.e., if they don't address every single requirement of the training product and or package, if your assessment tools are not written properly, if the way that your assessment activities are conducted, if they are not done in such a way that it can lead to the learner being able to, or if your assessment tools have been developed in such a way that there are deficiencies, and because of the deficiencies, the learner isn't given the opportunity to demonstrate their competency with the requirements of the training product, your tools will fail audit and you will fail clause 1.8 at audit time. We spoke in one of the recent webinars, we spoke about benchmark answers in assessment tools. I'm not going to go over that again, but please remember that an assessment toolkit consists of the instrument that your students use at assessment time. It includes your assessor benchmark answers plus instructions. It includes your mapping guide, and guys, it includes your RPL kit. We were busy working with an RTO on the last 2.5, 3 weeks that had to do a failed audit outcome response. And in fact, I think their response went in Wednesday evening. And even though they never, ever have students wanting to do RPLs, they failed clause 1.8 because they didn't have RPL tools. And guys, when it comes to audit time, the auditor is not interested in whether or not you have students wanting to be RPL'd. The NVR Act and the standards are unambiguous insofar as you must have RPL tools. Once again, unless your training product and or training package says that RPL isn't allowed, it doesn't matter if in 55,000 years of operating, your RTO has never had one person ask for RPL. You have to have RPL tools. And very, very brief one on RPL tools. I'm not going to go into detail because once again, we've done RPL tools. Remember, when it comes to designing your RPL tools, you can't go and copy and paste the requirements from the unit of competency verbatim into your RPL tools. Not compliant. Clause 1.9 to 1.11 is your validations. Guys, we all know that we have to have a 5-year validation plan. Now, your 5-year validation plan it's a non-ending cycle. And what I mean by that is, let's say for argument's sake that you started your validation plan in 2022. It means that your validation plan, when you initially developed it, would have been for 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. So there's your 5 years. However, 23 is gone. 22 is gone. Therefore, today, your 5-year validation plan should have the extra 2 years tacked onto it, so 27, 28. So what I mean by that is whenever you look at your validation plan, it must always be the current year, or the current year must be planned for, plus the additional 4 years. You can't go and develop a validation plan in 2020 that runs 2020, 1, 2, 3, 4, and, well, we haven't planned anything further than 24, because that is not the intention of a validation plan. That is not the intention or the regulator's intention of how validation activities should be planned. Please remember, you've got to have, it's like almost like an ongoing, it's almost like a travelator. It just goes on and on and on and on. In your validation plan, there are a few things that is really, really important to include. And this goes for both the validation of your assessment tools pre-implementation, as well as your validation outcomes that your assessment outcomes that you're validating. Your validation plan must include what the training product is. And guys, when I say training product, in this instance, if you only deliver, let's say, qualifications, you need to break down. You can't just say, hey, we are validating the Diploma of Quality Auditing next month. You've got to go and break down unit by unit by unit when the unit is going to be validated. You also need to put in your validation plan who is going to be doing your validation. So that includes your lead or your lead validator, as well as anybody else that is going to be helping with the validations. You need to have in your validation plan at least a column where the validation outcomes will be recorded, if any further actions are recorded, and any continuous improvements that are going to result from your validation findings. Now, here's a tip. When you do your validation plan, because all of those things need to be completed on your validation plan, when you are doing your validation plan, when it comes to nominating your lead validator and your any other validators, as well as industry specialists, if you choose to use them, don't put names down. Don't put names in there. Just put roles. So let's say, for argument's sake, that in your RTO, your lead validator is going to be your training manager. And your training manager will be assisted by your head BSB trainer and by the compliance manager. Just put job roles in, because when we are developing our plan, so if we're doing the plan today for next year, for argument's sake, and after say don't do it, those people with those names might be working for your RTO today, but they might have moved on in 3 years' time when we get to our 27 validation plan. And so often when people leave the organization, it's so easy to forget every single document that we need to go and change the name of the actual person. Guys, use titles, because in all likelihood, if you've got an RTO or training manager now, put in there, our training manager will be leading the validations. As long as those people are properly credentialed, obviously. I have never seen an RTO fail audit on clauses 1.9 to 1.11 where they have nominated a job role in their validation plan. I have seen people fail audit where they've nominated people, actual names in there, and at the time of audit, those people no longer work for the RTO. Please make sure that your validators are properly credentialed. Remember, your validators, whoever you use for validations, they either singularly or collectively must hold a TAE qualification and at least a TAE 4, unless you are delivering TAE training for us, but they must hold the TAE qualification. Their VET PD must be up to date. They must hold the industry currency, the vocational equivalents, but preferably the actual unit of competency that they are validating, and they must have industry currency. Now, just as you have HR files for your trainers and assessors, you want to have exactly the same HR files for your validators. And even if your trainers and assessors are also validating, my suggestion is have two different folders, one for your trainers and assessors, one for your validators. And where a trainer and assessor works as both a trainer and assessor as well as a validator, copy their files over so that when you open up your folder of your validators, it is complete. Please also remember, guys, that if you're using trainers and assessors, a person is not allowed to make a validation outcome on work that they have marked themselves. Make sense? There we go. And guys, please note that you need to validate both your assessment tools and your outcomes. Now, I had somebody the other day say to me, but the standards don't say that we have to validate tools. Guys, here's two things. The new RTO standards will require us to validate tools before implementation. So we need to remember the old ones had it, I think it was the 2012 standards, and then 2015 standards took it out, and 2012, 2010 standards. The old standards had it, the 2015 standards didn't have it, the new standards will have it. But although it isn't explicit in the 2015 standards that you need to validate assessment tools before you use them, it's actually scattered all over the standards. Because remember, clause 1.8, when we look at the rules of evidence and the principles of assessment, that speaks directly to having assessment tools that meet the requirements of the training package. As we go a bit further, you'll see that there are a number of other clauses that also speak directly towards having compliant assessment tools. When we look at clauses 1.1, 1.2, that says that we need to monitor our training and assessment delivery practices, that goes back to your assessment tools. So although at the moment in the 2015 standards, although it doesn't explicitly state that you must validate your tools prior to implementation, or if you've gone and made changes, the updated tools must be validated prior to implementation. It's scattered all around throughout the RTO standards. So a really good or a compliant 5-year validation plan will have one section for your assessment tools and another section for your assessment outcomes. Yep. Clause 1.12 and 3.5 speaks about RPLs and credit transfers. Guys, and I'm sorry, I am very aware of time, so I'm going to just go a little bit faster. I've said at least 5 million times in this webinar, RPL tools are not optional unless the training product or training package prohibits the use of RPL. Your toolkit, you need a proper RPL toolkit that includes also benchmark answers. When it comes to credit transfers, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I don't need to complete this unit in my learning program because I completed it through ABC Learning, your RTO needs to go and authenticate that AQF documentation that the learner gave you from ABC Learning. 2 ways to do it. If it was 2015 onwards, we go onto the UZ site, the student identifier site. If it was, and if it isn't there, then we go back to ABC Learning. If it was pre the time that UZ came in, then we need to go and verify with the RTO or the provider that actually issued it. Now, the best and the safest way is do it via email. If the RTO has, in the meantime, if they have shut down, contact ASQA, because ASQA normally has data from RTOs that have shut down. And if all else fails and there's absolutely no way that you can authenticate the validity of or if you can establish the authenticity of that AQF document in writing, i.e. the RTO is closed down or whatever, then accept a copy that has been signed by a justice of the peace, but that should be your absolute last resort. Clauses 1.13 to 1.16 is your trainer and assessor credentials. Guys, we have done trainer and assessor credentials. I think we've had about 3 or 4 webinars on it this year. I'm not going to go over it right now, but what I do want to point out to you is clause 1.16 says unambiguously that the RTO is responsible for ensuring that its trainers and assessors do undertake Vet PD. Doesn't say we have to pay for it, but it does say that you have to make sure that your trainers and assessors undertake Vet PD. If you have trainers under supervision, you need to have a supervision plan that is drafted before their supervision period starts. You need to have a trainer and assessor who is suitably credentialed for the training product that is going to be supervising them, and that trainer assessor is included in your supervision plan. Your supervision plan is also going to include the monitoring activities that the qualified and fully credentialed training and assessor will be providing to the supervised trainer and assessor. Well, what a handful. And we need to make sure our record keeping on that is sufficient. Trainers and assessors who deliver anything from the TAE package, be it the full TAE qualification or skill sets, they absolutely need to have a diploma in TAE or higher. And if they are training under supervision, they need to hold the TAE 4 if they are training other TAE students. And also remember that trainers and assessors who are not delivering in the TAE training package, a trainer and assessor who's working under supervision, they may not make assessment judgments. Obviously, they can sit with the qualified assessor, the properly credentialed assessor, and they can participate or they can watch them do the assessments, but a supervised or a trainer working under supervision may not make an absolute and final assessment judgment. If, for those of you guys who work for RTOs that deliver the TAE qualification or anything from the TAE training package, please remember that your validation activities must be undertaken by somebody who is independent from your RTO. So not one of your trainers and assessors, not your compliance manager. They've got to be independent. It can be a contractor, it can be a compliance consultant, but they must hold the correct validator credentials in order to go and do your TAE your validations. And once again, your record keeping is essential. Now, guys, I just want to very, very quickly go back to record keeping when it comes to validators in general. You recall I said earlier on, or I suggested earlier on, that you have proper HR files on your validators. The one exception is ASQA doesn't seem phased if your RTO has used a compliance consultant or a compliance consultancy to do the validations. They don't usually ask the RTO to provide the consultant's validator credentials. They would normally go to the consultant themselves. So if you do use an external consultant or consultancies for your validation, don't be too fussed about keeping records of the validator credentials. Trust me, ASQA will go and ask them if they are concerned. At the end of the day, what I've learned, it must have been at the end of last year, is ASQA actually knows compliance consultants, or they know who are the credible compliance consultants far better than I ever thought they knew. It was some comment that somebody, some ASQA auditor dropped at some networking event, that they actually know the consultants that know their jobs, that come up with or that produce good results and that produce compliant results, and they know who the consultants are that just don't know what they're doing. So therefore, once again, it's like we've never, their prep has never been asked to provide any validated credentials. You know, we do validations, we sign off the validation report. We've never been asked for validation credentials. I know that there are a few compliance consultants out there that have called in the past and said, I was just asked to see my credentials because I validated for XYZ company. Yeah, if you're using a consultant and ASQA thinks that they are a reputable consultant, then you're not going to be asked for validated credentials in all likelihood. And even if ASQA has their own doubts, they'll probably go and ask the consultant themselves. Guys, clause 1.26, if you guys can bear with me for another 8 minutes, then I promise I'll be finished. If you can, please stay with us for another 8 minutes. If not, then I'm sorry for going over time. Clause 1.26 deals with superseded training products. Now, when you know that a training product on your scope that you deliver is going to be superseded, you need to start your planning. Remember, once again, you are also going to have written records of orders, but you want to start your planning. You need to determine any learners that will be affected by the super session, i.e. they won't be able to complete their learning journey in time. You've also got to have enough time to actually let them know that their training product is being superseded. Now, remember that there's a number of training products that have a teach-out period of 2 years. Some have, sorry, it's usually 1 year. Some have 2 years, depends on the training package. Although your RTO can still enroll people once the training product has been superseded, if you do enroll people once it has been superseded, you absolutely must ensure that those students will have or will be able to complete their learning before the teach-out period is finished. And if for any reason the learner can't, then it's up to your RTO to go and make provision for that without it negatively impacting them. We often have RTOs go, oh, we're going to have learners that can't finish in time. We'll ask ASCWA if we can have a specially extended teaching hour period because our learners will be disadvantaged if it isn't extended. Guys, here's the thing. ASCWA, when ASCWA says that if you need to have a teach-out period so that learners aren't disadvantaged, ASCWA there's very specific things that they look at. If your RTO failed to take action in time, they're not interested. They will look at students that might have disabilities, learning disabilities, etc. Those they will look at. But unless you are requesting because your RT or because your cohort does have disabilities of some kind, you've got Buckley's chance of getting an extended teach-out period. So don't rely on that. Remember, normally when you, like I said, superseded training products have defined teach-out dates, and yes, sometimes ASCWA or the Industry Council, Skills Council will extend that date, but your superseded training products, we always have specific teach-out dates for them. Where a training product has been superseded and deleted off the National Register, we have 2 years in which to teach out. And if there are skill sets or certain modules of a training product, and modules is as per training.gov, not as per we call them modules, but skill sets, etc., they normally have a 1 year teach-out period. Sometimes, once again, the teach-out period is extended. However, I have in yonks and yonks and yonks of working in the sector, I've never seen a skill set the teach-out period be extended by more than a year or being extended past a year, and ditto for deleted training products. If you are training an accredited course, then your teach-out period is also 2 years. Guys, in finishing, if you are at audit time, if you have non-compliances with any of the clauses in Standard 1, you are, in fact, you know what? If you are non-compliant in any of the clauses in the RTO standards, so everything from Standard 1 right down to Standard 6, 4, one of those, you will not only be non-compliant with those specific clauses, but you will automatically be non-compliant with clause 2.1 because clause 2.1 of the standards say that your RTO must at all times be compliant across the board. It must always at all times comply with the NBR Act as well as the RTO standards. But it goes a bit further because if you have non-compliances in any of the clauses, when it comes to time to do the declaration on compliance, unless your RTO has had a full audit before your CEO signs the declaration on compliance, your CEO will not have the confidence that, or let me put it this way, before your CEO signs the declaration on compliance, your RTO really needs to have had a full audit done so that your CEO knows what they are signing when they do sign the declaration on compliance. If they go ahead and they sign the declaration on compliance saying, no, we didn't have any non-compliances, and at audit time it comes out that your RTO is non-compliant, then it starts getting interesting for the CEO and the RTO, and not in a good way. I remember that at the compliance conference in July, we had 4 ASCWA team members that presented at the conference, and at one stage, somebody asked Anthony Barkey. Now, Anthony is a senior regulatory manager at ASPA. And somebody said to Anthony, hey, these declarations on compliance that RTO sign, what does ASPA do with them? And Anthony said that what they do is they don't look at every single one of them, but when they audit an RTO, if there are non-compliances identified at audit stage, they will then, in all likelihood, go and pull that RTO's declaration on compliance to see if the CEO actually said, yep, you know what, we've got non-compliances to fix up. And if the CEO did not identify non-compliances and come a few months later, audit time happens, there are non-compliances, then ASPA starts getting a little bit less impressed. Not only that, clause 8.5 of the RTO standards say that an RTO must at all times comply to state and federal legislation. Guys, the NVR Act, from which the RTO standards are derived, is a federal act. And therefore, if you are non-compliant with anything in the RTO standards, you automatically fail clause 8.5 because you will automatically be non-compliant with the NVR Act. Similarly, the RTO standards is a federal legislative instrument. And once again, if your RTO fails any of the any of the clauses at audit time, then you are automatically non-compliant with clause 8.5. Oh, that was an hour and 40 minutes, guys. I am going to ask, I know that I've got some people with questions. I'm going to ask you guys, won't you please just email your questions to info@arcp.edu.au. I'm going to finish this webinar now. I think like I said, I've gone way over time. But guys, before I do, thank you so much to everybody that's joined me. It's been absolutely lovely hosting this webinar. The regulars know that I always say webinar Fridays are my favorites. Once again, apologies for not getting to the questions. Please, 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 please email them to me at info. Oh gosh, I didn't mean to do that. Please email me your questions at info@arcp.edu.au. Excuse me. They will pass them on to me. I know I got a few questions in from the previous webinar. There's about 3 or 4 questions I still need to answer. Guys, I have been running a bit behind. I'm so sorry. I've been living in airport lounges and doing forensic audits from the last time we were here until now. I will get to the questions, I promise. But yeah, like I said, please, please, please email me. And I will see you guys on the next webinar on the 17th of November. Thank you so much. Have a brilliant weekend. Bye-bye.